Hi, everyone, and welcome to this littleBits webinar brought to you from the littleBits education team on teaching coding in one lesson, featuring our code kit. I'm Naveen Murad, and I work as part of the education team here at the littleBits headquarters, and I'm joined by my colleague Erin Mulcahy as well on the line. I'll let her say hi.
Hey everyone, thrilled to have you.
Yeah, we're super excited that you're all here for today's webinar. There you go. You can see us. Just to preserve the quality of audio, we have our webcams off, but I'm Naveen. I'm the one on the right. And then Erin is on the line with us. She just jumped in. So before we get to the agenda, I wanted to just start we wanted to start by introducing ourselves and telling you a little bit about where we're coming from at littleBits, and then we're excited to hear about who you are and where you are. So if you can access the chat function, you can go ahead and introduce yourself there. If you can't, you can use the questions toolbar for all communication. That'll include questions that you want to ask us for a live Q&A at the end. And also at this point, introducing yourselves, where you're from, what you do, sort of what your interest is in coding or your experience with teaching coding or anything else you'd like to share with the group. But I'll start by saying I manage community programming here at littleBits. I've been here just over a year, but my career started as a classroom teacher. I actually went to school to be a middle or high school English teacher and spent the beginning of my career teaching middle school English in New York City public schools before then moving on to nonprofit education programming, and now littleBits, which has been a super exciting place to work. And so I'm talking to all of you today, not only from my seat at littleBits, but really from my experience in the classroom and the evolution to where I am now at littleBits. Erin, I'm going to let you introduce yourself too.
Thanks so much. So I'm Erin Mulcahy. I'm one of the founding team members of the littleBits crew. My focus is really how we develop products for educators and how we support you in bringing engineering, design, invention-based learning, and computational thinking to your students. My background is actually in science. So when I'm designing products, I come at it with my scientist hat on. But it's been a really great experience understanding how design thinking and electronics help bring STEAM and coding to life. And I actually didn't have any coding experience before I started with littleBits. Naveen, were you using coding in the classroom at all?
No, and in fact, one of the things I really like about having joined littleBits is that, so I was, my undergrad was in English literature. I loved reading, I loved writing, and then I pursued a master's in education, and I was a middle school English teacher. And if you would have asked me when I was in the classroom to integrate coding into, a literacy activity or project-based learning, or an elective in any way, if I had been approached by administration or another teacher saying, I'd like you to incorporate some coding, my answer would have been, I can't do that. And it would have been, I can't do that because I would have said, I don't have a computer science background. Oh, I'm horrible at math. It would have come from a lack of confidence on my end. Although I was a fully trained and capable English teacher, I wouldn't have felt comfortable or confident even teaching coding. But what I'm super excited about now is that now that I'm at littleBits, and I've had the experience of working with our code kit, if I went back and someone was asked me to teach coding and showed me and gave me the code kit and I sat with it and worked with all of the materials, I would now feel confident enough, even with my English literature background, to get up in front of a class of students and not only teach them coding, but what I think is even better, learn coding with them and learn together and sort of fail forward together and make it a more human experience of learning together. So I'm super excited for us to get to how CodeKit does that.
Awesome. Why don't you kick it off for us, and then I'll jump in the middle and tell you guys more about coding in 1 hour.
Coding in 1 hour, yep. So this is the first of a webinar series, and we'll talk at the end about the upcoming ones. But today we're talking about if you only have 1 hour to teach coding or introduce coding to your students, how can you do it? But before we jump into the how, we're going to step back and first think about why. Why are we teaching coding? Why are we talking about teaching coding and computer science in the classroom? It's really important that we all understand its importance before we just go and execute something in the classroom. So why coding? And I've seen this through my lifetime. I've seen this shift for myself, that education, it has moved from teaching skills and concrete and specific skills to actually more and more educators have realized that it's not about teaching students discrete facts or specific skills or how to use PowerPoint. It's much more about the habits of mind that we're teaching students, how to be problem solvers, how to think critically and creatively, how to embrace failure as part of the learning process and the design process and the growing process. And so it's really about teaching students to have these skills like critical thinking, like problem solving, like the ability to fail and face adversity and try again, that's preparing them to be future ready. And when we talk about being future ready, I think the statistic is startling, but gives us a wonderful opportunity at the same time, that 65% of today's students will have careers that we don't even know about yet. They don't exist yet. And I think that is a rapid shift, has rapidly shifted from a past where, when students thought about career exploration, they were like, okay, well, I could be a teacher, I could be a doctor, it could be a fireman. Right now, we can't even tell them what the options are going to be, but what we can do is prepare them with the mindset and the ways of thinking that will enable them to adapt to and succeed in the careers of the future. And littleBits really does this by being at the forefront of invention-based learning. And this type of learning really is developing these critical thinking skills, collaboration skills, creativity, communication skills, and sort of the attitude that students can be inventors and active change makers in the world. They don't have to wait until they grow up to make a difference or to do something impactful. And then that failure is part of every adult's process, and every successful invention scientist has failed a million times for every time they've been successful. And so those are really important attitudes and ways of thinking for us to teach our students. Then we talk about access and giving our students access to secure futures. I mean, one of the things that you see on the screen right now is that if we're just looking at the United States, computing jobs have the majority or they have the majority of economic opportunity in terms of the workforce for careers in the United States. And when I kind of wish that someone had told me when I was in school, it's great that you are really passionate about literature and reading and writing, and that's wonderful. However, you could still, if you have computer science, you can still pursue those passions, but you will have also so many other doors open to you. And so we need to give students the exposure, not to sort of corner them into it like they need to do it because it's an opportunity that might, open more doors, but because we want to at least show them that they have that option and that computing is going to be used more and more in very different career paths. And part of it too is really about equity and access. And if all schools were teaching computer science to all students, then all students would, in theory, have access to pursuing career paths and life paths that would allow them to have more stable job security and sort of futures for themselves. I mean, and computer science is used in much more than engineering, of course, we know these days, and we'll talk more about that. So it's really about giving students a skill that's going to open 1,000 doors in 100 different areas. And one of the things that will help is really level this playing field in terms of what kinds of jobs our students are able to get when they graduate from school. So the problem is, sorry, the title's not showing up on this slide, but the problem is not with interest, or not with lack of interest. When students are polled, the majority of them are expressing that they really love computer science and engineering, or at least they're really interested in learning about it. However, and parents too. 90% of parents when polled these are from code.org, want their child to study computer science. But only 40% of our schools are teaching computer programming. So it's not lack of want or interest from the parent or the student. We need to get more schools teaching computer programming, and that's the bottom line. They don't teach computer science right now. And I think there's this belief that computer science is about learning technology. So let's learn how to create a PowerPoint presentation or how to code in HTML. But it's not. Again, it harkens back to those ways of thinking. Computer science is really teaching students these skills that they're going to need and that will be applicable in the future and now, about logic, problem solving, being creative, collaborating, failing, iterating. So the STEM problem is in computer science. So I think that many schools, and STEM has now been around and I think is widely accepted as integral to our education system, and needs to be incorporated into all classes and all subject levels from K through 12 plus. Even, STEM for sure, STEAM, which we at littleBits like to talk, add the A in for the arts, is also has caught, the attention and is gaining momentum in the education field. But what people aren't really looking into is within STEM and within STEAM, that's an umbrella of multiple subtopics and what's being taught. And the opportunity is really in the workforce is really in computing skills and computer science skills. But if we look at where our students are graduating, only 8% are graduating in computer science. So how can we make coding more accessible? And not only to students, but I'm talking from my seat as a trained English teacher, who was all about reading books and writing essays. How can we make it accessible not only to students, but to teachers of all backgrounds so that they too have the confidence to learn and teach coding with their students? So this stick figure on the side could have been me scratching my head. What you see on the screen is what I used to think of when I think of coding, just a bunch of gibberish text on a screen. It seemed so foreign, like a very foreign language that I just didn't know, and so I wouldn't go near it. And I'm really thankful right now, having worked at littleBits, that has a mission to empower students and teachers alike to invent and create with technology, to now see that I can teach coding. Any teacher can teach coding. A 6-year-old can code. And we shouldn't be afraid to learn with our students. There's a really great resource that Erin's going to get into, talk about a little more. You have a couple of stills from this video here, but here's one of our teachers, Rob, introducing coding to his class. And before they have the computers out, or before they open the code kit box, what I think is a great thing to do to really introduce your students at an introductory level is to talk about coding in a way that they can understand. So it's not. In this video, this teacher he basically asks his students to code him. He stands in front of his class and tells the student he's now a robot, and they must give him specific directions to throw out this piece of trash in the garbage. As you can see from some of the stills, he did a really good job at a very literal interpretation, which students not only found funny, but it was effective in their understanding of how specific and detailed they need to be in order to tell this robot how to get this piece of trash into the garbage. And so this is really showing them in a concrete way that they can understand before we get to the computer or code blocks. Coding is about giving instructions to a machine, and how you give instructions matters. So we're going to talk today about, and I'm going to let Erin jump in a second. We're going to talk today about how you can use the Hello World lesson of the Code Kit to introduce coding to your students in 1 hour. And I'm going to let Erin take over here.
Thank you, Naveen. I love that example with Rob doing the robot too, because you can just use paper and trash and just simple things that you find around your classroom. I think the other one I've seen used pretty often is making the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, where you have a jar of peanut butter, jelly, and bread, and then the students have to instruct you. But obviously that involves bringing in food, so that one, the robot one's a lot easier. But the littleBits Code Kit, so I'll take you through some of the features of the Code Kit, and then we can speak specifically to the lesson itself. But the littleBits Code Kit was designed specifically for educators and students, designed for both informal and formal learning environments. What we intended to do with this kit was to make code easy and fun to do. So it integrates hardware and software, and it's made so it's accessible to people who don't have any background in coding or engineering. And we've also made it really easy to teach, and I'll speak to that shortly. You'll see on the screen here, so if you're familiar with Google Blockly, that's what our littleBits coding system is based on. It's just the drag and drop programming, so it's a really great gateway experience for students and teachers who don't have that coding experience, because it's visual, it's easier to understand. But the Google Blockly interface is also a nice complement to those who may have had some coding experience for things like Scratch or Hopscotch. Most of your students, especially the younger kids, have probably had at least a little bit of exposure to coding. So whether you're totally new or you've had some experience, it's not a big jump to get into the littleBits Code Kit app. So the goal of the kit itself is actually to introduce students to the physical computing by making engaging games and devices that they can create on the tabletop and then code on the computer. This video here is Rudy, which will play in just a second. He was one of our user testers. He was actually teaching at the high school level, but we had user testers all the way from elementary, middle, and high school. And the results were amazing. And that's actually something, as far as through our design process on the littleBits product team, we make sure that everything that we launch has been reviewed and liked by students and educators, because if it's not fun and it's not easy to use, we're not putting it out there. But the hook through the game, go ahead, Naveen, did you want to say something?
I was going to play, but if you're not
ready. Oh, 2 more seconds. But one of the coolest things that we saw is that because using the hook of games through coding, we got students to naturally start asking why something was happening, or if they had made one of the inventions in the app is actually to make a little soccer goal. They want to know how to add score or add a scoreboard to their game because it enhances their game. So we're providing students with that reason to dive in deeper, and it drives their curiosity to want to learn more. So I think, Naveen, we can play the video. This is Rudy. He's from the Bronx in New York City here. And he will just give you an overview of the kit, and then we'll speak specifically to the system itself. So take it away, Naveen.
Okay, great. And thank you, audience, for giving me just a moment to get the video up on the screen.
My name name is Rudy Blanco, and I'm a teacher from the DreamYard Preparatory High School in New York City. Today, we're going to be exploring the new littleBits code kit. We're going to learn a little bit about what's in the box as well as what's included with the app. littleBits are electronic building blocks that snap together using magnets, and what's really cool is they're real simple to use. This code kit is packed with everything you will need in order to engage your young people in game-based coding and engineering. Plus, it's NGSS and CS aligned, which makes it both fun and educational. This year at DreamYard Prep, we're going to be using the code kit to help our young people build instruments in a tech and arts integration class. The first thing you'll notice when you open your code kit are your quick start guides. The green one is for students and can be very helpful when young people are getting started on any project. The purple one is for educators, and you might want to keep this one nearby. There's also a detailed bit index that includes everything you need to know about your bits. It has mini challenges, sample circuits, and it also includes real-world examples. You also have a double-sided poster, which includes bits basics on one side and the invention cycle on the other. Now, onto the bits. This is the code bit, and it is the brains of the whole operation. The LED matrix for creating cool animations and messages, new and improved speaker for adding awesome sound effects to your games, a huge mounting board to secure all bits in one place, 2 sizes of USB cables for connecting your inventions and code, and some other familiar favorites like the servo, bar graph, 2 buttons, and a whole bunch more. And this is a rechargeable battery. Game changer. To start coding, your quick start guide will guide you exactly to where you need to go in order to download the code app. Once the app is downloaded, you'll have access to your getting started inventions, your code tutorials, and your 4 kit inventions. There's also a link to the educator resources page for teachers, which contains getting started videos, customizable lessons, and tons of student tools. And on top of that, there are additional inventions and lessons on the littleBits community site. Be sure to add your own. The littleBits code kit will have you and your students coding, building circuits, and designing games in little to no time. So, geek out and game on.
Okay, thanks everyone, and just give me a moment to get us back to our presentation.
That was flawless. Good job, Naveen. You can go to the next slide.
Perfect.
Awesome. So I was reading in some of the questions, which it looks like we can't use the chat. So questions are great. We're reading them, and we'll get to some additional questions at the end. But it looks like a lot of people have littleBits, whether it's the droid or the code, or there's some various kits that people are mentioning. So thank you for being a littleBits fan. If you have littleBits, so you'll notice that for the code kit, a lot of the parts look the same, and that's intentional. littleBits was designed so that it's a library of electronics, and there are some guiding principles for those of you who are new, one of which is the color coding. And the logic of the system is, at its simplest form, you just need a power, so that's blue, connected to your battery source, which for the code kit is the rechargeable battery. And Rudy is not kidding, it is a game changer for those of you who have been tethered to your 9 volts so long. So you just need a power, and then the simplest thing that you can do is just snap that blue power bit to a green output. And so outputs would be things like lights or motors or sound. For the code kit, one of the most exciting bits that I think we've added is this LED matrix screen. And so this is going to be your visual representation of what's happening on your screen. And then the next level up for your logic of the system is adding a pink. So you would put a blue power bit, a pink bit, and then a green output bit together. What the pinks do is add input. And so this could be button switches, sensors, so you can start adding complexity to your system. And then the orange are wires or logic. And this is the one that is really going to be the powerhouse for your circuit and is unique to the code kit. And Naveen, I think we can go to the next slide because we'll talk more about the code bit itself.
Great.
Well, so the code bit is the brains of your operation. This is what will enable your students to send code from their computers to their littleBits circuits that they've created. The connection is via Bluetooth, which is great because the only piece that you need to be online for with the code kit is just downloading the app. Beyond that, you can just use the code bit. Also cool, if you notice within the circuit, there's no additional wiring or soldering required. So if you're familiar with Arduino, it does require you to have like a level up experience with electronics. With littleBits, the coolest thing is that you're just using your inputs and outputs to plug onto the code bit, and you don't have to pull out your soldering iron. So it's just a really nice way to have that physical computing come to life without a ton of engineering and electronics experience. So next slide. So you see we built our circuit on the left. Then we're going to connect to our computer and do our coding with drag and drop programming on the screen. And then the ultimate goal, as I mentioned, is to create your own fun DIY games. And what this does is it makes coding tangible. So it brings it into the real world. Kids can manipulate it. They can play together. And for the game itself, what comes in the box are the bits. And you have access to the app for free. You can actually download it now if you'd like. But all of the construction materials, like your recycled cardboard and your simple arts and crafts tools, scissors, markers, tape, all of that is stuff that you would provide. So this is really another opportunity to bring that A into your STEAM and coding equation, where kids can get creative, they can customize their projects. And for older students, or if you have access to a makerspace or you run a makerspace, think about incorporating things like 3D printed materials or laser cut wood to give it more of a polished look. And you can easily see why we have a lot of people doing like Shark Tank-esque projects with littleBits, especially with the coding kit, because you're able to quickly add those electronic pieces and give it more of that polished product design look and feel. That obviously is not going to happen in an hour, but aspirational. So this is the CodeKit app. It's available on iOS, Windows, and Chromebook. This is where your students will be accessing their code and communicating with their circuits. It's super rich with resources. It's been designed to scaffold from introductory tutorials, so teaching you the basics of coding. All of the coding tutorials have introductory videos where students are introduced to a concept, and then they actually are prompted to practice those skills like inputs, outputs, loops, variables, and function in engaging formats. And all of the activities incorporate the hardware and software. And then, as Rudy pointed out, we have these invention activities where your students will be diving deeper into creating their code, their circuit, and then remixing it or making it more unique. So there's always a way for students to dive deeper and take it in a direction that they are personally invested in. And of course, for teachers, the educator portal, which Rudy mentioned, I go to this all the time, but bookmark this on your computer. It is accessible from the app itself. This was designed to be your A through Z resource of your introductory videos. The videos that we showed and the one with Rob being the robot are here on your first lesson. And then there's a whole nother tab with all of the lessons. All of our materials are accessible via Google Docs too. I think you can go to the next slide too. And this is one of the teacher tools tabs. So if you are interested in how to incorporate CSTA or NGSS standards, we've got you covered. If you're interested in the pacing, so if you have that hour, if you have that week, if you have that whole 8-week long unit to incorporate coding, there are opportunities for you to go as shallow or as deep as you would like. And of course, if you start diving in and have any questions, our education team is always here to support you. And we're happy to make sure that you and your students are successful in your coding endeavors. So, how to teach coding in 1 hour. Let's show a quick video, Naveen. I think we have a little snippet to show you what this looks like.
Yep, we're going to show you a snippet. Give me 1 second. here. To navigate between these. Okay, let's see if this one rolls. Do you see a black screen, Erin?
I don't. We see the teach coding in one lesson.
Okay, I think it's loading.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
I think it's coming. This is part of a clip from the Hello World tutorial lesson.
So let's build something with the code bit and learn how to use it. There's a very important tradition in coding called Hello World, and you and your bits are about to become part of it. For years and years and years, whenever somebody has learned to code, the first program they make says, Hello World. So naturally, we're going to teach our circuit to say, Hello World, first with words.
Hang tight, everyone. I think we're just trying to get the transition down. One sec.
Okay. So we're going back to our slides in just a moment right now. Great. Erin, it's all you again.
I mean, we actually didn't see the clip, but it's okay. We got it for like 1 second. But we will share the webinar afterwards.
I was sitting here watching it and thinking how lovely it looked. I'm sorry that you all didn't see it, but again, we're sharing a recording. We will be in touch via email with everyone who registered with a link to replay this. And you can go right now to the Educator Portal Full Code Kit and watch it yourself as well.
All right, so envision this. You set up your circuit on your LED screen, which we saw before. You will see the word scrolling, or the phrase scrolling, Hello World. Hello World. So if we have computer scientists or coders in the conversation. Oh, so Antonio says the clip came through fine. Well, maybe I just wasn't able to see it. Thanks, Antonio. So if you are a computer programmer or have experience in computer science, you are probably familiar with Hello World. For those of us who are new, fun fact of the day, this lesson incorporates a little bit of history. There's a tradition of using the phrase Hello World as a test message. This was first written in a book called The C Programming Language. And it's something that has really become a standard for new programmers. And so we thought it'd be fun as our first lesson to do kind of the tip of the hat to this history. And so this is just an example of, at the top you can see, this is what Hello World would look like if you were coding in the traditional sense. In the littleBits interface with the kapow pink callout, when they're in the app, this is what the students will be greeted with. And so right away, you'll see it's much more approachable. It's color-coded, so you start to understand that the code blocks indicate a different function. And you'll see the start, the orange block is asking you to wait until your button is on. And then students can customize the message. So Hello World is the one that we're providing, but as your students move through the tutorial, it will ask them maybe they want to write their name, or maybe they want to project an image. So you're going to see that on your screen, edit the code, send it to your code bit, and then you'll see it in real life. So it's a really simple activity, but it has tradition baked into it. So Naveen, you can move forward. Thank you. So this is actually the link to the video itself. We didn't want to play the whole thing just because it is 5 minutes long, and it is intended to be student-facing. So you'll see that the language and the illustrations are intended for your elementary, upper elementary audience, but you can absolutely go up to grade 8 with the content. So in the Hello World lesson, just Naveen's like, come on, let's go. We have just a summary. So your students will be being introduced to the bit basics, so that power input output wire functionality. You'll be introduced to the code bit, which again is that little brain that's going to communicate with your circuit. They'll get to practice the Hello World program. They'll have support on how to actually build the circuit, and then they will have that remix opportunity to customize their code. And then, of course, there is the paired student lesson, educator-facing lesson for the student activity, and that's available in the educator portal, all in Google Docs, so you can edit it as you see fit. And yeah, we've got your back. We've designed this to be as simple to implement as possible. So I hope you get to try it and let us know what you think.
And again, I'll just jump in here and say I would have been really reluctant to even try to teach coding or introduce computer science to my students. But I've gotten to know CodeKit intimately, and all of the resources that come with it in the educator portal and the student-facing materials. And really, what I think littleBits has done a really great job with is we know how hard being a teacher is. It's, in my opinion, one of the hardest jobs in the world. And what we really want to do is support teachers in every way we can to empower teachers so that they can then empower their students. And I'm telling you, everything is here. When you're a teacher and you have a million things to do, and then you have to try to figure out how to teach coding, it's really nice when everything is there for you, from student-facing materials to the teacher lesson plans and standard alignment that you need as a professional.
Great. So this is a question we get often, and it's something we've thought a lot about on the product design side, is how do I assess something like coding? How do I actually make sure that my students are learning through a lot of times what looks like just a very fun activity? But there's a lot of learning that's going on, and the activities are crafted with that scaffolding of skills and practices in mind. So if you're familiar with our STEAM student set or some of our other educator resources, the heart of what we do from a framework perspective is embedded in what we call the littleBits invention cycle. Very much aligned with the engineering design cycle, where you're creating a prototype, playing with it to test and get feedback, then remixing it either based on prompts that students encounter in the app, or it could be something that they are just genuinely interested to improve, to work on the feedback that they got through that play phase. And then we obviously incorporate our ELA and our Common Core standards through SHARE. So it's about understanding the process, communicating the process, and getting feedback, which is a huge part of being able to not only assess how you did, but to be able to respond to that feedback thoughtfully in your next project. So as far as this particular lesson for the Hello World, in the create phase, here are just some questions just to keep in mind. So as you're watching your students create that circuit, you can start looking at how well they understand how the circuits connect together. So you can think about asking students, like, what did the specific bits do, and how do you know? How does the order of your circuit impact what you're experiencing in real life? And what two components of those bits are always necessary and which are optional. We talked about that a little before, but if you have bits in hand, you can test them out and test yourself as you go along. Next slide. And in play and remix, in the Hello World, we can think about paying attention to how students are adding the code blocks to their program. And so through this, you can think about how they're uploaded the code to their circuit, how they are able to use the button to control what's happening in their circuit, and what happens when you make a change to your code. How does that impact what you're seeing in your circuit? And of course, share. I love to do the share as a group. I think it's a really nice ending to the lesson to show how students have remixed or changed their circuit from the original Hello World. You might see that students did the pixel art, or you might see that they added new inputs, or if you have art materials, maybe they actually put it into some sort of box and made it be more of a message sending device. But that's really the fun opportunity to hear what inspired them, note any challenging moments, And if you do have time, we have student tools online with things through the like the invention log, where students can actually record their process. And it's all about providing the seeds for improvement for next time. And this is the moment too where it's nice to lean into those challenging moments to talk about failure, and talk about failure, as Naveen said, failing forward. What were the moments where you got stuck? How did you encounter those moments, and how are you going to apply those skills to next time? So all of this in just an hour is what you're going to be accomplishing. And so you've done it. In an hour, you've created your circuit, you've coded your own interaction, you've even incorporated a little bit of history in that interaction. You've experienced what code does, not only on our screen, but how it impacts something you've created in the real world. And you've been able to share and give feedback on yourself and others through that assessment phase. So as Naveen was saying, those skills that we're looking for, computational thinking, collaboration, problem solving, creativity, and you're really creating the seeds for that engineering design mindset. I can't think of a more exciting, quick introduction to coding. And I hope for you guys that you get to try it out, and that it's hopefully just the beginning of your journey.
That was great, Erin. Thanks. One of the things I want to add in, one of the things that I like particularly about the code kit or coding with littleBits is that something that can seem so abstract, so on the screen, so much like a foreign language, really becomes much more tangible when you're able to send code to the physical circuit you've built and see the differences as you change the code in real life. So it's like, you know, coding out loud or coding in 3D or however you want to imagine it. But especially for young children or anyone new to coding, you know, sending a message, coding a message on the app, even using coding blocks, and then seeing it scroll across the screen, you have this immediate connection because you're seeing it physically happen. And so I think that piece, just like, you know, when we did it, we talked about doing an introductory activity where your students, you know, give you directions for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or give you directions for throwing out a piece of trash into the garbage can. You know, making it physical, tying it as much as you can to, you know, real life experiences that they're used to is going to take demystify it and take away some of like the intimidation of, you know, coding is this complicated, crazy thing that I can never access, when in fact everyone can access it.
I think that's a great point too. And also coming back to the, you know, why it matters. Once they have coded that message, this happens to me all the time. I'm sure it happens to you, but like now I look around the world and I see, oh, that's how my light switch turns on there. Oh, that's how they're making that digital billboard on the highway switch. And so it happens kind of subtly, but once you start to establish these skills and use littleBits and coding, the world kind of opens up, and your curiosity again asks you to think why.
Awesome. So, I mean, I could talk on and on about like how grateful I am to have sort of encountered littleBits, and particularly the code kit, particularly from my seat as an educator and not a STEM, you know, not with a STEM background in terms of access for teachers and access for students. But we'd like to take this time to answer any questions you may have. So some of you have put in questions. But you can also right now start putting in questions that you have for either myself or for Erin or for the both of us about either the code kit or teaching coding in the classroom or any of the resources related to the code kit that we mentioned in today's presentation. And I do notice there's one teacher, Cindy, is saying that her principal got her some littleBits and she has little to no coding skills. Well, that's exactly that was exactly me. I just taught 6th grade, and I would have, and you at least you teach math, science, and social studies. I taught literacy, and so I think having littleBits it's just such a like accessible tool in terms of teaching building with invention and teaching coding, that you can confidently as a teacher use the resources to teach your students coding. And also I'm a really big advocate for teachers not being afraid to show their students that they don't know something and learning with them. I think it really makes you human. It makes students really respect you when they see and respect you and respect themselves. And when they see a teacher not knowing something or failing and like overcoming that failure or iterating or challenge, overcoming that challenge, it gives them the confidence to do it as well. I mean, they are looking up to you in a sense, and the more you can show them that you are not this perfect, all-knowing being, but you are learning every day as they're learning every day, and that you can in fact learn things together. I think it makes it really more meaningful for the students, and it gives the students a sense of sort of shared ownership of the learning. In fact, I hear so many teachers always say that the kids end up teaching them. They start by teaching the kids, about littleBits or about coding, and then pretty soon it's flipped and the kids are teaching them all sorts of amazing things.
I see a few questions about how many students per kit. So the experience was designed for 1 to 3 students. For the younger students, I like having 2 students on a kit, and you can decide how you want to differentiate the roles. But it's nice that you have the computer and the kit and the students are working together on the project. For older students, I think you can stretch it more to up to 3 students. Are better at collaborating and can usually divvy up the roles themselves.
And there are questions about the accessibility of the app and what information it collects. So as Erin mentioned earlier, you do download the app, but once it's downloaded, what's great is that you can work with it completely offline. And so it's not, it's stored, it's on your computer, and students are using it through your computer. So once it's downloaded, it's not collecting individual account information for students. It's completely safe. So you don't have to worry about that. Any other questions about, any other questions, keep typing them into the questions section. We'll take new ones.
I see someone else. Will more bits be added? So we actually have about 70 bits in our littleBits system. And with littleBits being a modular platform, you can add bits to the code kit. So if you have your your STEAM student set, you can add bits to it. So there's a wealth of opportunities to choose from.
Awesome. And I see a question about if you're operating on a limited budget, which we understand is often the case with educators, which set would you recommend? So to be realistic and coming from the classroom and understanding like that, our code kit and our STEAM student set were really designed for the classroom, and they're really robust with resources. I still wouldn't steer you to a different kit. I would really, if you're using it in this classroom, you're using it as a teacher or an instructional tool, I really would steer you still towards the code kit. And if budget is a problem, but you still want to have it and give your students an experience with it, the way I would do it is, get 1 or 2 or 3 kits or whatever your budget will allow, and integrate it into station work or integrate it into part of a project, so that your whole class might not be able to work on code kit at the same time, but maybe through the cycle of a project or through the cycle of a month, they will have each student or small groups will have the opportunity to work with the code kit. So I think there are ways that you can structure your lesson and your projects to have students share the materials and not use them simultaneously, and that can solve some of the budgetary problems when thinking about how do I have enough of this for all of my students to use it simultaneously.
And code.org has a ton of free resources too, especially with Hour of Code coming up. So if you are tight on your budget, that's, as Naveen was saying, maybe some students can just be working on the programs on code.org, and then you have a rotating station where they get to do the physical computing part. And that is really the differentiator. It's the high engagement, it's the handheld, tactile piece of littleBits that we're adding to the coding experience.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, because you just partially answered this, Erin, but someone asked, what makes this different from like Google Coding Program or any other coding program you can get at the school for free. And what it is really the bits. The fact it's not just the coding, the block coding interface. Although I think like the student-facing materials that go with that are amazing. It's really this making coding tangible, coding out loud, coding in 3D. It's really this ability, the combination of coding and littleBits just really brings coding to life. It brings it off something that's traditionally on the screen, off the screen, in a way that engages students, in a way that makes them understand because they can actually see the results of their code in real time with lights, with sounds, depending on their circuit. And so I think the big difference is the coding plus the bits is in CodeKit what is really differentiating it from other coding programs.
And we hear a lot of just anecdotal feedback from educators that with littleBits and with that tactile nature that littleBits provides, a lot of times the learners in your classroom or the superstars in your classroom will start to shift for students who might be not as engaged or perhaps just, don't love just doing the on-screen coding. When they have the opportunity to manipulate the tools, we find that a lot of kids kind of have this spark that is ignited within them, and they will be the ones to all of a sudden start teaching their peers or want to dive deeper. And we hear often like there hasn't been a tool that has reached those students in that way. And so if we can change the course or the engagement for one student, in my mind, that's a win. But what I've seen is it's usually the whole classroom that's really excited to be doing the work.
Awesome. And then I've seen a variety of questions around which was the one I wanted to do? We'll take this one. I had another one, but I lost it. So there's questions around classroom management and guidelines for students when using the kits, and problems that a teacher might not anticipate. So if you haven't used the littleBits with your students in the classroom, what are some good classroom management tips? So I think roles and responsibilities are empowering the students to sort of be responsible for the kits and the bits. Is one way that you can help make sure that the students are monitoring each other actually and managing the work themselves. I think a really cool idea that I've heard of when you're teaching students about the bits or about coding is to have students or small groups of students become an expert in, for example, pink bits, the inputs, or the power bit, or the orange bits, the wire or logic. And so that way, each student has sort of their responsibilities. They have an area of expertise, which gives them confidence. Other students come to them to learn about a particular type of bit, or depending on how many bits you have and how many students, you can even make students an expert in just one single bit and just know the ins and outs of the LED matrix and become the LED matrix bit expert. And so giving students not only the responsibility of becoming an expert in one particular area, but for teaching their peers about it, actually helps keep them all on task and helps manage the entire classroom, because when they are engaged, they are going to be more on task and focused. In terms of the physical bits, storing them in Tupperware or plastic, like a fishing tackle box, or we sell a storage solution tackle box at littleBits. You can also get your own plastic containers. Plastic and see-through is great because the bits are color-coded, so that way you can store them in the closet. After you've opened the box, you can store them in the closet and you can see here, grab the pink bits, grab the blue bits, grab the green bits. So I think the two things I'm suggesting are physical storage with clear plastic bins or tackle boxes that you can easily get. And then the second is really giving students roles and responsibilities when they're working with the bits to teach each other.
That's awesome to me. I think we have like 5 more minutes. I'm trying to quickly go through the questions. This question's from Alan. He said his students meet weekly for 45 minutes. Can they do the featured projects in this time, or would you recommend stretching it out a few weeks? So this Hello World activity, you could squeeze it into 45 minutes. The tutorials that come in the littleBits Code Kit app are also designed to be digestible, quick bites. The one piece that I would recommend stretching over the course of several days, and the curriculum guide that's provided online for free will walk you through that. Anything that involves the invention challenges like the scoreboard or the guitar, the tug of war, the hot potato game, because you are doing a deeper level of engineering design, that can easily be a whole week, 5 days of 45-minute chunks. So in that case, just being able to store your projects overnight and being able to save on the same computer can be helpful. And in that curriculum guide, we do have some additional tips. So hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. And I'm going to loop back because now I remember the summary question I was trying to pull together. There are several questions around the resources, like loving the teacher robot video clip we talked about, some of the other resources Erin referenced. Personally, what I would do before even making an investment is downloading the free CodeKit app, because even if you don't have the physical bits with you or the physical kit in front of you, you can download the app for free today. You can watch all of the videos. You can see for yourself all of the student-facing videos, the tutorials, the projects, the coding on Canvas. It will link you to the educator portal on our website, which will have all of the lesson plans, the standards alignment, the scope and sequence, the student handouts. I mean, everything. You can take a look at you can have everything in your hands except the bits just by downloading the CodeKit today and taking a look. And then I think, why wouldn't you start there? See what you can see for free, and then hopefully you want to get your hands on the bits and see what you can do when you combine coding with littleBits, with invention with littleBits. So we have just a couple more minutes. I'm going to do one last question, and then we'll talk about the next webinars in this series and how you can get in touch with us if we couldn't get to your question. So someone asked if an 8-year-old can start playing with bits. Is it too early? It's not too early. So littleBits are designed for ages 8 and up. We have seen teachers and parents use it with students, as early as kindergarten in a more guided way. But as a product, 8 and up is the recommendation. So it is definitely not too early. And I'm a parent of a 4-year-old, and I'll tell you that there are so many tools for teaching coding and introducing coding to children as young as 2 and 3. I think that littleBits is somewhere on this journey, and as your students come into the kindergarten, first, second grade, definitely third grade space, it's the perfect time to bring in the bits in terms of their experience with programming and with engineering. So we're going to go to the next slide, not because there are not more questions, there are, and I wish we could answer them all, but as Erin and I mentioned, today was about the one Hello World lesson you could do if you wanted to introduce your students to coding in a 45-minute or in 1 hour or one class period. We're going to, up next, have a live webinar on November 15th at 4 p.m., so please register now, about teaching an introductory coding unit. So Erin got into this a little bit, and again, if you download the CodeKit app today and then go to the educator portal on our website, you'll see that there is a full unit. We just talked about one lesson today. There's a full unit that you can do, and we're going to be going into that unit in detail on our next webinar, November 15th at 4. If you have any questions for us, either about this webinar, upcoming webinars, or littleBits in general, you can always email us education@littlebits.com, and we'll make sure that the right person on our team gets back to you. Well, we want to thank you guys all so much for joining us today. We know that time is something that educators don't have a lot of and have so many things to do and are constantly multitasking. And I say that from having been in your seat. And so we really thank you for taking the time to join us today. And we really do hope to hear from you with your continued questions and your feedback as you try the code kit with your students. And Erin, I'll let you say your goodbye as well.
I think Rudy said it best. Geek out and game on.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you on the webinar.